This is Robert Harper with Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division. Thankful today and glad to bring you the Merchandiser Minute. It's Friday afternoon, September the 9th, 2022. And let's take a look at how the futures markets closed out on this short week of trading due to the holiday this week in Chicago. December corn up 20 cents a bushel for the week to close at $6.85. And remember, if you go back to July the 25th, we have a gap in the futures chart down at $5.83. So keep that in the back of your mind. But this week, after 4 days of trading, again, Dece corn up 20 cents for the week to close at $6.85. November soybeans down 8 cents for the week to close at $14.12. And in both of these, corn and soybeans, we know they're, whatever we want to call it, positioning, consolidating. The speculators and hedgers, commercials, everybody is in great anticipation of the USDA numbers that'll be coming out on Monday. So the trade this week was very much influenced by those. But again, November soybeans up and down this week, but closed down 8 cents for the week at $14.12. Same thing with beans as with corn. If you go back to July 25th, there is a gap, a hole in the futures chart at $13.46. So we have to keep that in our mind as well and know that in years past, and when we look at precedent, futures trade often likes to fill those gaps in the charts. So we're going to think about that as we go into next week. We look at our old crop wheat contract, December wheat. Wow, what a different story for wheat this week. Up 58 cents a bushel to close at $8.69. If you've got unpriced basis bushels or old crop bushels in the bin, again, up 58 cents this week. We've also seen some improvement on basis for wheat. Give Josie or I a call. We'd like to talk to you about that. It looks like the destinations that we can move milling wheat to specifically are paying up a little bit on basis, and they're paying y'all to have held it in your bin since June, so we can talk about that. When we're thinking about wheat, y'all are buying seed for this fall as we speak. You've been shelling corn hard this week and gotten over a lot of acres. In a lot of that land, you've got to plant wheat behind. And so you're buying those inputs now. If you look out to next year, July 2023 wheat up 46 cents a bushel this week to close at $8.84. So a really good opportunity here to sell a small portion of your next year's wheat crop. Again, give Josie or I a call. We'd like to talk to you about that and talk to you about the basis values that we see, whether it's at flour mills or at feed mills for your wheat. So lots to talk about this week. When we look at the themes, we want to keep coming back to the main theme that's working through the news cycle, and that's global recession. Not only recession here in the United States, but global recession. One news report after the other is going to be covering that. And obviously, overall, when we think about recession, we think about less demand for agricultural commodities. However, when we look at recession here in the United States, really over the last 40 to 60 years, often we've seen an uptick in commodity prices when the overall economy is in recession. That's not always the case, but again, like with so much right now, we're getting mixed signals. Many places across our economy. But again, a big theme for the week that has driven the futures trade, partly driven the futures trade, is global recession. We see that coming from a lot of ways. Inflation, supply chain problems, that's a broken record. But also a broken record and a problem is the Chinese economy. It's a big one, as you all know, and they're struggling over there just like we are here with a lot of different issues. But one they're struggling with, it's getting the most attention, in my opinion, are lockdowns around this COVID virus and problems. So we'll keep our eyes on that going into next week. We saw a lot of press this week about Russia and about Russia's comments on this grain peace deal that was brokered and started in August, allowing wheat and corn to be exported out of the Black Sea. Russia's president saying that the world has been cheated, that the locations, the entities, the countries in the world, the entities in the world that need these bushels, the ones who really need them aren't getting them. Talks are underway between them and the UN and Turkey and Ukraine, and all those political channels are opening up again. So maybe even today, where we saw such a big rally in wheat futures, maybe the speculators know something, or they're speculating on something that could happen next week around that trade deal. So keep your eyes on that. Another theme for the week. Again, moving in that direction, we saw big volatility in crude oil this week, especially to the downside, and we hit the lows of the year futures contract wise. Again, that's going back to our talk and our discussion all week long about recession. And tied into that is the opposite net effect. We had the dollar hitting 110 on the futures index this week. The dollar still above a 20-year high. Lots of strength there. News this week out of Argentina, almost on a daily basis. We know that their economy is struggling with runaway inflation, a lot of different issues, but we saw this week their government making some changes basically to how their farmers are taxed, how the tariffs are set up, and how exchange rates are done. And it's trying to encourage, the government is trying to encourage the Argentina farmer to sell some beans and some meal, the crushers to sell some meal. We'll see. It could add, by my figure and what some folks have shared with me and taught me this week, as much as 30% more to their price there at their farm or at their crush plant. So I think we'll see some more farmers selling in Argentina. That was obviously the goal of the government. We're going to watch how that plays out this week as well. Our Secretary of State this week was in Ukraine announcing more aid over there. We also saw this week agricultural news out of Ukraine that the first fields are being sown with this year's fall small grain crop. We know a couple of weeks ago their ag ministry told us they hope to plant 40% of their acres of wheat this fall. So we'll see what goes on there and how that impacts the futures trade and then therefore your cash price here in Virginia. But news out of Ukraine this week that farmers are beginning to sow wheat. It was interesting this week. Overall, the news cycle's a bit lighter in my opinion, and I think I've heard a few of you say that as well, as far as news, whether it was bullish or bearish related to our futures prices. And we did see lighter trade volumes on the futures market a few days this week. I don't watch that as closely as I should, but I was reminded this week, and I did look at the volume numbers of how many contracts are trading, and the numbers were lighter. Very interesting there. We did not get an export sales report again this week from the USDA. As we know, they're working through a transition on their software system, but we did see some flash sales, and we did see that both Iran and Taiwan bought some U.S. wheat. That was really, really good news. And we know that closing the week out, we're getting a new commitment of traders report that the speculators are long corn, they're long soybeans, and they're still short wheat. So let's take a look at next week. Watching the weather, obviously. We're watching political developments here and around the world. But the big deal next week, we're going to get it right out of the gate, as a buddy of mine says, on Monday at noon. The USDA is going to be releasing the September crop production report. We get so many numbers. Again, one reason why maybe the trade consolidated or positioned this week and we weren't as wild as we have been volatility-wise on corn, wheat, and bean futures. But let's take a look at what the average trade guess is showing. Harvested acres for corn, average trade guess 81.6 million, with a 14 billion bushel crop coming in at 172.5 bushels per acre is a national average. Again, these are guesses if you take all the analytic firms and average them together of what the USDA might show us at noon Eastern on Monday, September the 12th for the September crop report. Again, corn 172.5 expected yield. Let's look at soybeans, 51.5 expected yield, 87.2 million harvested acres to make production 4.4 billion bushels total for this harvest season. So we'll see what the USDA says on Monday. Get your wish orders in the computer before that report comes out. Give Josie or I a call Monday morning. We'll look forward to speaking with you. This is Robert at Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division.